Are you a fan of horror? Are you a fan of 80s movies? Well, stick around because today I'm doing the top 5 David Cronenberg movies. I have a lot of favorite directors, but one of them is, in fact, David Cronenberg. He is one of those directors that tackles a lot of genres. He'll do a drama, he'll do a horror movie, he'll do a sci-fi, and each one of those genres, he brings something different and interesting that other directors don't bring. He's one of those guys that never copies another director. He makes things his own, and that's what makes him fresh, original, and different. So for number 5, we have a movie that I saw for the first time a couple of months ago, and actually thought it was really bizarre, but I grew to like it. And it's a movie called Crash. Not to be confused with the 2004 Academy Award winning film, it's a 1996 movie that he directed starring James Spader. The story in that movie is James Spader and his wife are both having problems with sex. They can no longer get off to their normal, mundane sex, and they're trying to spice things up. And even then, they've gotten to the point where they've tried everything, done everything on the book. So James Spader gets in a car accident, and he befriends a woman who gets in a car accident, and he starts noticing that he gets really excited and turned on by the woman that got injured and by her disfigurement. So he starts befriending this woman, and they have this weird chemistry about disfigurement. For a first-time viewer, you're going to be like, what the fuck am I watching? But if you watch it and pay attention to it, it really takes a message on how we are as a society in terms of always seeking for something more and more and more grotesque, more exciting, because that's how the brain works. We have a dopamine release, and it's kind of like a drug. You always need something bigger and higher and stronger than the first time. It's a movie that the first time it will shock you, but the second time you're going to get a lot from it, and that's why it's on number 5 on this list. For number 4, we have a movie that I haven't seen in a while, but I really enjoyed when I first saw it. It's called M. Butterfly, starring Jeremy Irons. This movie is interesting because it's very, very, very different to all of other Cronenberg's films. Cronenberg typically uses a lot of body horror. He combines psychological and physiological effects of the body to bring a different and strange message. With this movie, it's really about how this guy who is an accountant meets a woman. He thinks that she's a woman, befriends her and falls in love with her and is having an affair with her, but is in fact a man. So this movie came around the same time as another film titled The Crying Game. Cronenberg made a very good comment about both films. In The Crying Game, the main character doesn't know that the woman is a guy. He actually doesn't know, and he is disgusted by it. Like he knows that he just doesn't want to be in that situation. Whereas in M. Butterfly, it's a man who in fact is attracted to men. He is just trying desperately to justify the fact that he is attracted to a woman, even though it is a man. Because when you watch the movie, he eventually shows himself not as a woman, but as a man. He just dresses up for an opera, which is the M. Butterfly opera. It's a very strange movie. Not many people have seen this, but I definitely recommend it. It is very original, and I really like it. For number 3, this is a movie that a lot of people probably may or may not have seen. If you're a horror fan, you probably have. And that movie is Videodrome. Videodrome was released in the 80s, and it stars James Woods. James Woods works for this TV company, and they encounter this channel, a pirated channel, that has a lot of sex, violence, grotesque imagery, and they don't know where it's coming from. But the more James Woods watches this imagery, the more he's enthralled by it, and the more he gets sucked into it, literally. He starts touching the TV, and it becomes very real. It's very surrealist film. You don't know what's real and what it's fantasy. It has a lot of great practical effects. It's very strange on the first watch. I wouldn't recommend this as the first movie to watch as a first-time viewer of a David Cronenberg movie, but if you've seen some of his other films, watch it, give it a chance, because the first time I saw this, I did not like it. But with multiple viewings, I've enjoyed this movie a lot. It has, again, great practical effects, great acting, and it stands out to this day. The message in this film is really about the effects of violence on the mind, and how we as a society are always interested and excited by violence, crashes, and all these other things, even if we say we don't. Like, look at your daily basics. You're on traffic and you see a car accident. Most people will stop and look at that car accident to see if there's something fucking disgusting or something messed up. Most people do that, and they don't even realize that they're doing something like this. So this movie does that message, and it still translates to this day. For number 2, we have Scanners. This is a movie that I think is the second most popular film. And I like this movie. I think this is a movie that also requires multiple viewings. It's basically about mind control. Literally the first shot of this movie is a guy showing he can control someone else's mind. They both have the same ability. And there's an iconic sequence that probably a lot of people have seen where a guy's head just boom, blows up. So it literally starts with an explosive shot. It's a great movie, has practical effects, great acting. There's some bad acting from some of the other lesser known actors, but it still holds up to this day. I definitely recommend it. For number 1, this is my favorite David Cronenberg movie. This is a movie that I watched several times, and it probably has the best performance by Jeff Goldblum. And that movie is The Fly. The Fly is a remake of the 1958 film, which in itself was an adaptation of a book called The Metamorphosis. And this remake is very different from the 1950s movie. The 1950s movie was more of your typical drive-in horror film where a scientist switches heads from a fly, and it's a very corny movie. But the remake is so good, it still holds up to this day. It's basically about a scientist who discovers a way to create 2 teleportation devices to send himself from one to the other. At first he can only send inanimate objects, and eventually he can send himself, but little does he notice that there is a fly in the telepod. What happens is that the device cannot have 2 separate genetic patterns, so it fuses them together. He comes out normal and he's slowly transforming into 170 housefly. As he likes to call himself, Brundlefly. So he slowly transforms into a fly. The effects are spectacular. They still hold up to this day. There's no CGI. There's no stop motion. This is all done with puppetry. A lot of people worked on this film creating the effects. The guy responsible was nominated. I'm not sure if he won an award. His name is Chris Wallace, who would go on to do the sequel, The Fly 2. He directed it and he did the makeup effects for that film. So this movie also has great performance by Gina Davis too, who plays the love interest, and they were actually dating at the time. And the reason why this movie works so well is because even by accident, this movie is a message on, at the time, the epidemic with the HIV virus. So again, if you're a fan of horror, if you're a fan of practical effects, watch this movie. This is definitely the best film in David Cronenberg filmography. And it is the number 1 on this best top 5. And with that, I hope you enjoyed this video. If there's a David Cronenberg movie that you like that I didn't mention, please leave it in the comment section down below. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and share this video with everyone you know.